So good afternoon to all of you. And so we will continue our discussion on graph streaming and sketching, which we started last time. And today we will see some graph algorithms which are not only in edge insertion model, but in turnstile model. Okay. So if you recall, graphs are given as ZVE and edges are E1 to EM, seen as a stream. And our questions were what kind of problems we could solve with small space and can we handle edge deletions. And then we learned that most of these problems have a lower bound of omega n memory, and that led to researchers to define what is called semi-streaming model, where you restrict your space requirement to n polylog in space. And there are two kind of model here. One is like edge insertion model, where only edges are added, and the turnstile model, or also called dynamic model, where edges are added as well as deleted. Okay, so last time we saw only insertion only model, that is no edges were deleted and just edges were added. And in that setting, we saw connectivity, minimum spanning tree, case connectivity, bipartite, testing whether a graph is bipartite or not, spanners, which gave us a constant factor, which gave us factor 2t approximation for all paired shortest paths in space roughly O n to the power 1 plus 1 over t. Okay, and then we saw a sparsifier. What was this? It was basically preserving all cuts of G within 1 plus minus epsilon. Okay, so that is for all S subset of Vg. If you look at S and look at V minus S and look at this cut Cg, the capacity of cut in G, then what we were able to show that we will find a weighted subgraph of G such that Ch of S is at least 1 minus epsilon times Cg of S and 1 plus epsilon of Cg of S. Okay, so we saw these things, and today we will change and we will do graph sketching for connectivity purposes. Last time our algorithm for graphs, connectivity was very simple. All we were trying to do was to keep a minimum spanning tree in graph. Okay, and that we could keep on fly, and that took us in log n space. That's it. Okay, but today our model is different. Now edges will be both allowed to added as well as edges will be allowed to delete. So we have seen previously this notion of linear sketching on vectors X that allows for several powerful application and including ability to handle deletions. Okay, and so how will graph streaming with deletion will look like? So each token in stream is of the form E delta, where E is an edge and delta is -1 and +1, and -1 will mean that you're going to be deleted, and you +1 means that you're going to add this edge to your graph. And we would like to maintain a sketch or data structure of size n polylog n such that one can answer basic questions, example connectivity queries. Okay, and you will be able to see that the connectivity queries or connectivity sketch can also be used for other problems such as case connectivity or testing bipartiteness in dynamic model or in the turnstile model, right? Because all we needed last time was to keep a connectivity sketch. So connectivity sketch is a very basic sketch, and this allows us to do several things in turnstile model. Okay. So what was linear sketching? So let's just have a small recap of what we did in linear sketching. So suppose you're given a vector X in Rn that is updated one coordinate at a time, right? And so what we did, we picked up some sketch matrix MR in some R. So you picked up, let's say, a broad matrix, okay? So a matrix which is rows wise thin, but columns wise could be large. And we maintained a sketch mrx of dimension k. So basically you are given an n length vector, but what you are storing is basically mrx, right? And this mrx has dimension k cross dimension has k cross 1. So basically you are mapping an n dimensional vector to a small dimension of a vector of dimension k by multiplying with this random matrix mr. Okay, so the sketch matrix mr depends on this random string r, and you recall that we never defined this explicitly but stored, but we implicitly defined it. Assumption is that for mr ei, for unit vector ei, can be computed efficiently from r. What I mean by this? So suppose recall that so you wanted to say coordinate xi to make some changes to this. So you gave me I and delta. So I wanted to make changes x plus xi plus delta I, let's say delta. So how are we doing this? Well, so what is x plus delta I in with respect to this matrix? So what do we? So we basically I think it shouldn't be alpha I. It should be say not delta I, say alpha. Okay. So basically what we were updating was that okay, we wanted to do x plus alpha ei, right? So now my vector x has become, so this was my vector x. Now vector my x has become same, but at the ith coordinate I have updated this with alpha. So which is like multiplying your x and adding with where ei is a unit vector, or not unit vector, like unit basis vector, where at ith coordinate you have 1 and 0 everywhere, right? So how do you update it in sketch? You basically do alpha mr ei. Okay, so what it meant that not only given this x which we are keeping in as a sketch, we can also update the sketch with the help of this mr by by getting these entries on the fly and updating it. And then we used to do post-processing of mrx. So this is how linear sketching worked in general. And so we will need this for our connectivity purposes, because as I told you in one of my lectures, is that everything which works in turnstile model is nothing but a linear sketch. Okay, of course there are some this theorem was proved modulo certain assumptions, but basically this is true, that anything which you can make to work in turnstile model, you have to look for a linear sketch. Essentially you have to look for a matrix mr which allows you to do update both when you're making a positive change as well as negative change. Okay, so another concept that we will need is something called L0 sampling. So what was L0 sampling? So what was L0? So let's see, what is x0? Is the number of non-zero coordinates, right? This is basically distinct elements. Okay, and so actually there exists sketch to estimate a number of non-zero coordinates or number of distinct elements. We never saw this algorithm. We saw a different algorithm, but there are algorithms, okay, which can estimate sketches. You can what do you call? You can there exists sketch to estimate x0. Okay, but that is not what we will do. What we will do today is something called L0 sampling. Okay, so we would like to output a non-zero coordinate of x near uniformly. Okay, what is the meaning of that? So, I mean, I would like to output one of the coordinate which is non-zero roughly uniformly at random. Meaning, suppose I have vector x, and suppose it has some coordinates 0, 0, 3, 0, 0, 5, something. Okay. Now, what I would like to do, I would like to give you one of the coordinates which is non-zero. Like, so suppose I is a subset of coordinates 1 to n that are non-zero. Let's say not I, let's say A, because this is what we will use. Okay, that are non-zero. What I would like to output you is one of the coordinates in I, okay, one of the coordinates in A with probability roughly 1 over A, okay? Of course, there is some plus minus delta. So this is what I mean by uniformly. And this will be via a sketch of roughly order log square n sized sketch, okay? So matrix is large, but we will only need order log square n with seeds or information to see this matrix, okay? And since it is going to a sketch, it will allow both positive and negative entries in X, okay? Okay. So the first ingredient today we need is sketching for L0 sampling, okay? So we'll prove this a little bit later, but what we need is this the following lemma. So let us understand what this lemma tells us. So there's just a random matrix A its dimension is let's say D cross N, okay? And what is the D? D is roughly order log square N, okay? So that for any X in R to the power N, with probability at least, right, 1 minus 1 by poly N, okay? We can learn IXI for some Xi not equal to 0 from AX, okay? So it will output you one of the coordinates, okay, non-zero coordinates. So it will output me, okay, which coordinate is non-zero and what is its value, okay, with very high probability. So with the help of AX, okay, so this long vector, and all we have is a sketch AX. With the help of this, I call this Y. So from Y, with the help of Y, I will be able to generate a non-zero coordinate I and the value it is stored IXI. So if you had a big vector, n length vector, x1, x2, dot, 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 xn, then, and there could be many non-zero coordinates. So we will learn one of the coordinate which is non-zero. So not only we will learn the coordinate which is non-zero, as well as the value it stores. Okay?
Saket, a question.
Yes.
So this I, the coordinate, and I, the index of the vector, that's the same I?
Yeah. No, I didn't get your question, Fir.
So
X,
you learn the I of xi, or you can learn I of xj?
No, Fir. So think of this way, like I have a coordinate for 1, 2, 3, capital N. Okay? So X is an n-dimensional vector, right?
Yes.
It has a first coordinate, which I call x1. The value stored at first coordinate is x1.
Okay. And
value stored at second coordinate, I'm calling it x2. Value stored at ith coordinate, I'm calling it xi. So for example, what I mean by this, suppose you had 2, 3, 5, 6, 0, 9, 4, 3, 2. So this is my first coordinate, second coordinate, third coordinate, fourth coordinate, fifth coordinate, sixth, 7, 8, ninth coordinate. Okay? So,
okay. Yeah.
So I not only need to give you which coordinate, right? Because this is some value, right? Which could be large, negative, 0, right? So I will give you which coordinate of my vector X has a non-zero number and what is its value.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that's my confusion. No. Yep.
Okay. So this is what this lemma tells us, that look, I have a small sketch with the help of which I can learn a non-zero coordinate and the value, okay, of X. Value xi from there. Okay, good. So it has some very useful properties. So let's try to understand what useful properties we can have. Suppose we have multiple vectors x1 to xt, okay? Then we can determine a non-zero element from every one of them from ax1 to ax2 to axt, okay? So what I mean by this, so this is like a just over union bound. So what is the so let's ask ourselves, so suppose I have a vector x, I think this is a very, I should not have used x1, xt, okay? I think the right, because I'm using, so I have a vector, say y1, yt, I have a T vectors, okay? And what you're storing is AI1, AY2, AYT, okay? And from each of this, so suppose this is in a sketch, let's call this a sketch Y1 tilde, Y2 tilde, YT tilde, right? Now, notice that I'm using the same matrix A to sketch AY1 dot 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 AYT, okay? And with the help of the same left matrix, I want to learn a non-zero coordinate for each of these guys. How can I do this? Well, what is the probability that AY1 makes a mistake? Okay, like what is the probability that at least one of them makes a mistake, right? Well, one of them makes a mistake is like either first one makes a mistake or second one makes a mistake, last one. So one guy makes a mistake with probability 1 over n to the power big O of 1, right? So if this is say delta, right, then I am going to, so the mistake made is upper bounded by delta t. So probability that I will succeed in each of them is at least 1 minus delta t. This is just the union, right? So now this big O of 1, it is, we will see it will be just in our hand. So for example, what I mean, if you take 10 log square n, then I can make it say n to the power 10. If you take 20 log square n, then we can make success probability be n to the power 20. So what constant here depends only on just how big this matrix you take, and that big is just a constant time log square. Okay. So now if I wanted to sketch several vectors simultaneously with A, then suppose T was like say n cube, right? And I wanted to succeed with good probability, then maybe I should take 20 log square n. Then I will succeed with probability 1 minus 1 over n to the power 17. So this is what I mean by union bound, right? So based on your need or how many vectors you want to simultaneously find this non-zero coordinate, you choose the parameter like the constant in log square n accordingly. Okay, so we will see an example. So all I want to tell you that you can learn using the same matrix several coordinates, non-zero coordinates, but you have to apply to different vectors. Okay, and then we can apply using union bound. Okay, good. But now A is a matrix. So suppose I have AX and I have AY, and we wanted to find non-zero entry for say Z equal to X plus Y. But then what is AZ? Well, AZ is nothing but A into X plus Y, which is AX plus AY. So given AX and AY, I know what AZ is, right? And once I know AZ, I can also learn the non-zero coordinates in non-zero entry for the vector Z, which is X plus Y. So this is where the linearity of this matrix works, okay? And we will see a good property of linearity being used even in the connectivity sketch, okay? So forget about the proof. Is the statement of the lemma clear? And what all things can we use it for? Okay. Okay, so this was the linear algebra part that we need our connectivity sketch. Second thing which we need is what is called Budowka's algorithm or Budowka's algorithm, I don't know. Okay, so we saw last time that if we wanted to compute minimum weight spanning tree, then neither Kruskal's algorithm works nor Prim's algorithm works. Okay. Okay, and we use this trick that, you know, look at your spanning tree, add an edge, and if it creates a cycle, delete the heaviest edge. Okay, there is another algorithm for MST, okay, which is called Budowka's algorithm, which is generally used for parallel algorithms. Okay, okay, so what is this simple algorithm? Okay, so this is a non-streaming algorithm for connectivity. So for each node, you select an incident edge. Okay, so so this algorithm works in rounds. So what happens in the first round? In the first round, every vertex is singleton. Okay, so so you construct. Next, what happens? So think of this that it's like a proposal algorithm. Every vertex just picks one of its neighbors and proposes. Okay, so everybody throws an edge. Okay, it's possible that he throws an edge to him, he throws an edge to him, so and so on and so forth. So after the end of the first round, what we do is that you look at the connected component, okay, and you put them together. Okay, so this round one is done. Now round two, what we do is that we collectively call this component vertices as one. Okay, and we select an edge incident to this connected component. Like what I mean by incident to this, an edge which has one endpoint in this connected component, other outside. Okay, round two gets completed. Okay, you got another components, bigger components, and now you again do the same operation, right? You pick up an edge which is incident to one of the components and you propose to another, like you just, and you keep doing this until this process terminates. Okay, if a graph is connected, okay, at the end, so what will I do is that I will keep all these proposed edges. Let's call this E tilde. These are the proposed edges. Okay, okay. Notice that E tilde will have more edges than just n-1, right? Because you will have n edges, potentially n different edges in the first round itself. Everybody proposes a different edge, right? It could also be that, like for example, he proposed to this. So for example, look at a path, right? Look at an example of a cycle, for example. Let's add. Okay, here's a cycle, right? Suppose you just orient them in some direction and everybody just proposes. So this guy proposes this edge, 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 this guy. So look, you have proposed n edges in the first round itself. Okay, so all, I mean, right? So it's not that we are creating a spanning tree. All I'm saying at this point of time is that you keep proposing these edges, you collect all these edges as E tilde, okay, and you repeat till. So what was the process? We propose. Now look at this edge set in the first round. Look at the graph. Look at the connected component imposed by this set of edges. You contract them into a components. Now look at the edges which are incident to this. Just 1 second. So fun of teaching from home. Okay. Anyway, so this is an algorithm which repeatedly at each round you contract the connected components and what do you call? Selects an edge which is incident to this connected components and does the job. Okay. So what is the feature of this? First of all, let's try to understand that there are at most log n rounds. Why? Notice that I want to claim that in every round, a smallest component had size 2 power, say, I. Okay, and let's say round 0 is when you have singletons. Okay, clearly in the second round, I want to look, everybody has sent an edge, right? So if I look at the graph induced on this set of edges, okay, definitely every vertex will have, so suppose he has proposed to him, and maybe he proposed to someone else. If you collect all this, the component size will only become bigger, right? So whatever the component will be becomes now at least 2 power 1. Now, suppose I am in ith round and every minimum size component is say 2 power I. Now they propose, so at least 2 guys. So what happens is that in each round, at least 2 components merges. And since the smallest component had size 2 power I, in the next round, the smallest component will have size at least 2i plus 2i, which is greater than equal to 2i plus 1. Okay, so it just means that the number of rounds we need so that so what happens is that either the size of every component either stops growing or doubles its size in every round. Okay, so this is what is happening in this algorithm. So the total number of rounds we need in this algorithm is at most log n rounds. And now if you notice, this is why this algorithm is quite used in the parallel algorithms, because the round complexity of this algorithm is quite small. But what is the second property? The set of all edges selected includes a spanning forest of the graph. I'm not saying that is a spanning forest, but it includes a spanning forest of the graph. Okay? And that is clear because look at the end, you have set of edges so that if suppose graph was connected, you have just one connected component. So if you take a subset of edges from, it means from this I can pick a subset of edges which is like spanning forest or spanning tree. Okay, but now tell me how many edges we have used. In the round 1, we used n edges, at most n edges. In round 2, we would have used at most n by 2 edges. Round 3, we would have used at most n to the power 4 edges, and so on and so forth, n to the power 2i. So if you do computation, this shouldn't be more than 2n. So the total number of edges which will be selected during this process is at most 2n. So total number of edges is like order n throughout this process, and the total number of round is like log n. Okay, is this algorithm for computing MST clear? I mean, this is nothing we were doing in streaming at this point of time.
So Saket, this is
yes.
This is for MST. You actually select the minimum weightage at each point.
But I was just doing since we were doing only for connectivity purposes. We do. But you are right. So if we wanted to do it for minimum weight spanning tree, as you say, we should select not an incident edge, but select a minimum weight edge. Am I right? Is this what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because I don't know this algorithm.
Yeah, that's what you do.
Okay, so if you wanted to do a minimum weight spanning tree, as Venkatesh points out, for each node, you don't select an incident edge, but you select a minimum weight edge. And if there are several, you can just select any one of them. Okay, but still doing MST exactly in streaming, we still don't know when both insertion and deletions are allowed. Okay, so selecting a min weight edge will be a difficult task, but selecting an edge will be a simpler task. Okay. Okay, so I hope this algorithm is clear to everybody. Okay. And third ingredient we need is sketching for graphs. So what is a sketching for graphs? So we all are used to looking at graphs as like vertices and edges. But now if we want to use some matrix and this, we have to understand graph as in terms of some linear algebraic object. And the linear algebraic object which we will look into is so one natural way people have used vectors is that you think of a complete graph on n vertices. So this is like kn, okay? And think that these are on the nodes 1 to n. Okay. So the one way to define a graph is a vector which is n choose 2 vector, and basically it's a long vector of dimension n choose 2. Okay. And if that particular, so given a graph G, what will be Fg is basically incident vector of edges of G, right? Because what this will be like, this will be like 1 choose 2, like 1 comma 2 edge, 1 comma 3 edge, 1 comma 4 edge, so on and so forth. This is what it will mean, n minus 1 comma 2 n. So for complete graph, this is all 1, and you take any graph G on n vertices, I could view that as a subgraph of Kn and delete all, like put all those guys zeros which edges are not present. So this way also I can represent my graph. Okay. Okay. But unfortunately, so this has been used in some context, but the kind of context we need for our graph application, we need information about edges incident to each vertex, not all the edges which are present in the graph. Okay. So we need slightly different way of looking at this vectors. And then people came up with this for each node V, okay, rather than having this F in Rn choose 2, as I told you, right, rather than having this Fg, right, this is basically, say, think of this as an incidence vector of G. So now I can think of this incidence vector of G, if you notice, as, okay, let's think of all the edges which are incident to V, V1, or since we are using, okay, since we are using the vertex set as 1 to n, let's say 1, 2, 3, ... n, right? And more or less, I would like to think of this as an F1, F2, ... Fn, okay? But you have to be a bit careful because an edge ij occurs both in ith coordinate as well as for the, so suppose I had a edge I comma j, right? Then the way I have explained, this is why I wrote more or less. You will see what I mean by more or less. Okay, is like this I comma j, this is an edge which is present both, is incident to both the vertex I and both the vertex z. So somehow this will be, so if you would have taken this adjacency matrix, then this is like symmetric. There is one here also, one here also. So this will appear in both places. So Fg is not actually sum of these guys. Okay, this is all that I wanted to tell you. Okay, but I can define a notion of Fv in Rn choose to be that only considers edges incident to V in the complete graph. Right? So now I don't care. So for Fv, okay, it's going to be, look at all the coordinates where V is one of them, and if that particular edge, so anyway 0 everywhere, right? And if that particular coordinate, if some Vj, some Vw is an edge, then you put 1, 0 otherwise. So you basically, or rather, I think of this way, look at a graph G, look at a vertex V, and let's look at all the edges which are incident to. This is a graph, right? So let's call this graph GV. So think of FGV. This is your vector. Okay, that's it. Okay, so essentially the row of V in the adjacency matrix. Now, why use n choose 2 dimensions? This is one question which is interesting. Because this allows us to use what do you call linear operations over different nodes. And there are some proofs that if you try to sketch these graphs into little dimensions, smaller dimension, it is a bit difficult to do it. But the kind of operations we need, this vector is very useful for our purposes. So we sketch each FV using same sketch matrix M, and this takes order n polylog n space. Okay, because for each vertex, so what I mean by when I say, so using this vector, I would like to do the following operation. Oh, so if you recall this algorithm which I just now told you, this algorithm, for each node we select an incident edge. So now for every vertex we'll have some sketch, okay, which represents its neighborhood, okay, and our objective is that from its sketch output an edge which is incident to this vertex, okay. So this is my goal. So to achieve that, what will we do is that we will have one sketch matrix M, and using with the help of this M, for each vertex V, we will have a sketch. So we know that for each sketch we need polylog in space, and since we are going to keep sketch for every vertex, okay, total amount of space it will take is like n polylog in space, okay. So this is a broad idea of how we will. So concretely, the vector which we will use is following. So we will have vertex set 1 to n, and we define vector a to the I for node I of dimension n choose 2 as follows, okay. So as I told you, right, this vector coordinate, this vector, each coordinate is indexed by some kj. Now if I'm trying to write down the or vector for ith guy, I of node I, if k and j are not equal to I, neither of them, then they are not the edges which are incident to I, so I put 0, okay. But I notice that I am doing something more funky, okay. So but now, so now let's consider those k comma j where one of them is equal to I. So suppose if I is equal to k, okay, and I is less than j. So think of this is like I am a vertex here, and the jth edge, j is a higher neighbor than me, okay. Then I put 1, okay. But now if ai kj and ji equal to j and k is a smaller neighbor to me, okay, then I put -1. So think of this way. So if I am I, and if I have a neighbor which is lower than me, then at that place I put -1. If I have a neighbor higher than me, at that place I put +1. Okay. So this is all. So my vector is slightly different. So I look at all the edges which are incident to me. Okay. Of course, only those places will have non-zero coordinate, but the non-zero coordinate could either be +1 or -1. If the coordinate has an edge where the index of the vertex is higher than me, then I put +1. If the index of that vertex is lower than me, then I put -1. And lower or higher makes complete sense because I am identifying my vertex set with 1 to n. Okay. Okay. So so in a simplistic way, what are we saying? So with each vertex I of the graph, we are associating an n choose 2 length vector that is indexed by pairs or nodes, and the only non-zero entries correspond to incident edges I comma j in E, and this entry is 1 if j is greater than or equal to I, -1 if j is less than or equal to I. So here's an example, concrete example. Okay. So this is a graph. Let me draw this graph. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1 to 2, there is an edge. 1 to 3, there is an edge. 2 to 3, there is an edge. 3 to 4, there is an edge. And 4 to 5. This is a graph. Okay. So now 1 should have only edge to 1, 2 and 1, 3. So 1, 2 and 1, 3. And what are these vertices? These vertices have higher index than me. So I put +1 and 0 everywhere. Okay. Now look at 2. Okay. 2 has edge from 1 as well as from 3. But 1 is a lower index than 2. So I make it -1. Okay. And 3 is a higher index. So 2, 3, look at the 2, 3 coordinate has an edge 1. Okay. Now look at 3. 3 has edge from both 1 and 2. So we have to look at 1, 3. This is 1, 3, right? And we have to look at what you call 1, 2. No, 2, 3. So 2, 3. But both 1 and 2 are lower index than 3. So there's a -1 here. Okay. And similarly for 4, there's only one edge which is incident to 3. And this is from the 3, 4. So -1. Right. So look, these guys are like, it's not that I do anything. Right. I have a canonical ordering or canonically indexing of coordinates like 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, okay, this is 2, 5, sorry. Okay, so this is a canonical thing. So first 1 and every other pair, then 2 and every other pair, 3 and every other pair, 4 and every pair, so on and so forth. And if you look at 5, well, 5 has just one edge incident to, which is 4, and 4 has a smaller index, right? So you put -1. But 4 should also have an edge with 3, right? 3, 4. Yeah, that's -1. Yes?
So in the row which is corresponding to the third vertices,
yes.
So third is adjacent with 4, but you didn't put 1 there. So is it like,
oh, no.
Edge for the edge 3, 4, you should have 1 because 4 is having an indices more than 3.
You're right. So this is, let's see. Sorry, there is 1. Okay, I'm also human. This is a mistake. Okay, there should be 1.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Making an example is not easy. Okay. So, I mean, you understand. So all I just wanted to do is that give you an example, and this is how you construct. Okay. So any question with respect to construction, forget about proof and everything, that will come in a minute. But for now, do you understand what is signed vertex edge vectors are? Okay. And now, why did we do -1? You will see a magic of this in a minute. Okay. So this is a lemma which I want to prove. Okay. So suppose S is a proper subset of 1 to n, then summation I in S, A of I, is a representation for the node obtained by contracting S into a single node. Okay. What I'm meaning of this? So after I contracted, what am I interested in? I'm interested in edges which are incident to this vertex. Like not the internal edges, but the edges which are going across the cut SB minus S. So non-zero entries of this corresponds to edges between S and V minus S. Why?
Yeah, but what do you mean by contraction? You identify the vertices, or because maybe they're not connected, right?
So Feder, so let's define the notion of contracting S. They were connected, Feder.
No, but maybe they're not. If you have two non-adjacent vertices, you also contract them.
Let's see.
Or you just identify as vertices.
The way we were doing, at least for the connectivity, it is like normal contraction, but it wouldn't matter. You're right, Feder. So we should just say, okay, so when given S subset of 1 to n, by contract, let's look at the set of nodes here, okay, and I identify them, okay, and I only care about the edges which are incident to them, okay. This is it. So I identify them, okay, whether they are adjacent or not adjacent. Okay. So what I mean by this, I have a vertex Vs, and my graph, what I do, I delete S, replace with Vs, and make every vertex not in S that is adjacent to a vertex in S to be adjacent to Vs. Is this okay?
Yeah, and in your representation, you also there's no double edges, so it's perfectly fine.
No double edges. No double edges. Okay, there's no double edges. Okay. It is important to not have double edges. Okay, but now let's see what is happening here. So basically, I would like to show to you that non-zero entries of this corresponds to edges between S and V minus S. Okay, and why this is true is that look at this. Look at here is F and look at V minus S. Okay, and look at the vectors. Okay, suppose there is an edge here. Okay, I and J, right? Now, if I have an edge ij, then at least for one of ai, if I look at the coordinate, okay, look at this vector ij and I comma j, it will be +1, and for the same coordinate with 1, it will be -1, right? For example, you look at this picture, right? Look at 1 comma 3, right? This is an edge which is incident to both 1 and 3. So if I'm looking for, say, this, okay, suppose this is my f, okay, so then look at edge 1 2, right? Look at edge 1 2. At least this edge 1 2 will once occur for the lower index with +1 at the same guy, and for the second guy the 1 becomes a lower index, so it will appear as a -1, right? So when you sum the vectors, and first of all notice that every column has just 2 entries, one 1, other -1. Is that clear? That for every column there is only 2 entries, one is 1, other is -1, right? Every column. Okay, so if there is an edge inside and I sum up the corresponding vectors, it will appear once as 1, other as -1, so they will cancel out each other. What will not cancel out? If I have a vertex which is outside, then when I take some of those guys, then I know that the corresponding vertex is outside, so I am not summing up that entry in that column. So either at that place I will have, so for example, if I look at this, let's sum up 1 and 2. What I'm going to get? 0, 1 comma 3. This will appear as 1 into the sum of these two vectors. So if I sum up these top guys, what I'm going to get? Let's see. Let's say I'm going to get here. Okay, this is going to be 0. This is going to be 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? Which makes sense. This is like 1 comma 3 edge appears as 1, 2 comma 3 edge appears as 1, right? So if you sum up the corresponding vectors, edges which are inside, they will cancel out each other, and what will be remaining, the non-zero entries of the sum of these two vectors will precisely correspond to those edges which are crossing. Is that clear? And this is why it is important and it is interesting for us, that when we contract or when we sum up these vectors, what is left after summing up, only those non-zero entries, okay, only those non-zero entries are left to be non-zero, which corresponds to edge with one endpoint inside S, other endpoint being in V minus S. Okay, so this is proved by picture.
Okay, so could you do the same with zeros and ones if you take summation in GF2?
Summation in...
Because then 1 and 1 is 0, and you're perfectly fine, right?
Okay. Yeah, it should work because nothing else is happening. Yeah, so if you do under modulo GF2, then they will just sum up, so that's fine. And if an edge is going out, then there is only one place it will be 1, so that will just follow up. Yes, sir, this will work. Okay. But we may not work in GF2, so okay. Okay, so so now I have given you, so a stream of edge updates will be like EI delta I, where EI specifies the endpoints and delta I is -1 means insert or delete. Okay, so this is, and notice that it is in strict turnstile model because there's nothing meaning of negative edges. Okay, and we want to know if G is connected at end of the stream and find a spanning tree if one such. Okay, and we want to use n polylog in space for some small c. Okay, so that's our setting. Okay, so I have told you 3 objects. First was this linear sketch. Okay, second was this MST algorithm which we will implement, and the third point was a sketching of vertices. Okay, so these are the 3 things which I have told you. Okay, and we want to know if G is connected at the end of the stream or not. So now we will use all these three objects to give a connectivity algorithm. That's our goal. Okay. So recall that offline algorithm. We start with each vertex in separate connected component. In each round, each connected component picks a single edge, leaving it. All chosen edge added and connected components updated. Equivalently, swing the connected component to a single node. Repeat until graph has single connected component, or equivalently, we have only one. Okay, so this is the algorithm we are going to, and as I have shown you, this will terminate in order log n iteration. It is important that it terminates in order log n iterations. Okay, okay. So this is the algorithm we are going to implement. So let's focus on implementing the first iteration of this offline algorithm. First iteration, not the second round, third round. No. So we will pick a sketching matrix M, and we'll keep sketchage of MAFI for each I in M. Okay. So we have fixed one matrix M. Okay. And we are going to keep, what were we going to keep? So for each vertex I, say 1, 2, n, these are my vertices. I'm going to keep MA1, MA2, MAN. Okay. And what is the size of this matrix M? Well, the size of this matrix L is going to be some poly log n cross n choose 2. Okay. So this is what it is going to be, right? But what is the size of M of A1 is some poly log n vector. Okay. So M of A1, it will be some vector which is like, say, y1, y2, y. Okay, y1 is a small vector, y2 is a small vector, yn is a small vector of poly log n dimension. Okay, so the total number of bits, and what will happen the moment each edge ij come, we are going to update which one, both A of I and A of j. Okay, so recall what is A of I? That's simple, right? This is some vector. Okay, this is some vector. Forget what, like, so now I am interested in computing. So what is, if you, I mean, so now suppose you added, so this is A of I, and now some edge has come, and now you want to update it. So this edge, suppose it is added. What is the meaning of this? At some place we have to go and make -1. Some place we have to go make some place we have to go and add +1. Okay. So to this vector, we are going to add some 0, 1, somewhere, and maybe to the vector AJ. Let's just do this one. Open clearly. Okay. So let's look at this vector AI. Okay. This is long vector. Okay. And what you want to do is +1 at this coordinate. Okay. And maybe you have AJ where at the same coordinate, what you would like to do? -1. This is what you would like to do. Okay. And what you have is MAI. Now, what is this vector? What is this vector? I can write this vector. Suppose this is some tth coordinate, right? So then I can write this is nothing but this, like sum of these two vectors is nothing but A of I plus E of t. Agreed? This is what the new vector is. Like new AI is this, right? So now what we need to compute? We need to compute M of AI, right? M of AI plus M of ET. And this is what we have. This we have. And we would like to compute MET because this is linear matrix. Okay. Now, how can I compute MET? Okay, so if you had a matrix, okay, and suppose here is 1, right? So what is this? Like, what does this mean? It just means that you go here and suppose this is at some index. So basically all you want to do is some particular column. You want to get a particular column of some matrix. This is all that you wanted. Okay, and what is the property of this matrix M? Well, I can compute what is this values. So what is this? What is this vector? So like this into this is nothing but this guy. This into this. So all I need is a t dimension. Like suppose this matrix is some D cross n choose 2. So I want to generate some column which is given by this row, but that is the property of M. I can generate this column on the fly. So what will I do? Looking at this coordinate, I can generate this guy, and then whatever this y is, I just add this vector to this. Okay. Now, if this would have been a -1, what I need to do? Well, if it is -1, then I need to go at this place, okay, and add -1 to this, right? Because I want. So then I go to this guy and just add -1 to this, because this is what we have multiplied. Again, I can update it. Okay. And if it would have been a delete operation, what is the meaning of that then? If I want to delete, so wherever that coordinate is 1, now I need to subtract -1. Okay, right? So I again go generate this and do minus. Okay, and wherever there was a -1, I can add +1 at that coordinate to make it 0. So I can do this. So this is what I meant when I say that whenever you have a linear sketch, you can do this kind of update operation if you are able to generate the columns of this matrix on the fly, because it all is nothing but you have a vector, you generate this column, multiply with the multiplier and add those two guys to update your new yi. Okay, so this is how we can update this. So now each edge ij comes, we update both a of I and a of j in a small space. Okay, what is not clear, I mean that this matrix M, as I told you, you can generate the columns of this matrix on the fly. Okay, so whenever you need, you generate on the fly and do this. And that is, we have seen before, but we'll see the sketch matrix construction today again. Okay. Okay. So after seeing all edges, so now, okay, so this is all that you have stored. Okay, so what has happened to you? So now you have stored these objects, okay, these sketches. Now the stream is over and you want to check whether the graph is connected or not, right? Okay, so what I do, so after seeing all edges, now I'm going to use this L0 sampling from the sketch to pick a non-zero coordinate from A of I, which corresponds to an edge incident to node I, right? Because what does this gives us? It gives us a coordinate and the value, right? So I have this vector which either stores 0, right, 1 or -1. So what will I get? I will get a coordinate, maybe, oh, this is 10th coordinate. Okay, great. And what is its value? -1. Okay, great. Then I know there is an edge. Which edge it is? So even it is 1, 2, like you can think of this as like 1, 2, 3, and choose 2. And whatever this vector I comma j is here, you give it some number like 27 or 28. And you know that the moment I say 28, oh, this is the coordinate I comma j it means, right? So for each vertex, now I apply my L0 sampling algorithm and pick an edge. Okay, so now I have some set of edges. Okay. So sketch size is order n big O of n log Cn to enable correctness of L0 sampling with high probability, right? Because we want each edge to happen. And if you recall correctly, that's a first union property we talked about of our sample matrices. Okay. So this is the property we had, right? Union bound, right? So you just have to choose how big constant you need log square n, so that simultaneously you're able to make sure that each of these guys are good with very high probability. Now, so that's the first round is done. Okay. Now the next question is, we need to recurse after picking edges in first iteration and contract to create new contracted graph. Okay. This is what we need to do the second time. Okay. But you know, the contracted graph depends on the sketch, and we cannot make another pass because of that. You get my point? So what we need to do now, right? So this is where the linearity will come to our rescue, right? Because now we have contracted the graph, right? And it depends on the sketch, right? So it's not that we can make another pass of the stream that, oh, now look at this connected component and this. So you're just going to make one pass. So whatever you have contracted, from there we need to do something, right? So this is where we will use the linearity of our sketch to say, oh, for the contracted vertices, I don't need to see another time the sketch to create the vector. I can create the vector by looking at the vectors which is in the contracted objects. Okay? And this is where we will use the fact that if I sum these vectors, then if I look at what does it represents all the edges which are emanating out of this. Okay, so what does it mean? So now let's implement two iterations of this offline algorithm. So we pick independent sketching matrices M1 and M2 and keep sketches for M1A1 and M2AI for each I as before. So now we are not keeping one sketch, we are keeping two sketches. Okay, so we kept two matrices M1, M2, and for each vertex 1 to n, I'm going to keep M1A1 and M2A1, M1, okay, A2, M2, A2, M1, AN, M2, AN. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Now, suppose H is a contracted graph obtained by using M1 for first iteration. Okay, and suppose S is a connected component that gets contracted to a node V. So now I want to have a sketch for nodes in graph H. So now what I'm going to say, look, oh, M2 of AV of node V is nothing but look at I in S, M2 of AI, right? So if I have sketches for every vertex in S, then I have a sketch for this contracted vertex, right? Great for us. Okay, so I do not need to see the second time streaming if because of the linearity of our matrices or linearity of our sketches. Okay, but why do we need M2? Can we not use M1 itself for these purposes? Do you understand the question, right? Now you notice that I kept two independent matrices, and for each vertex I kept two independent sketch. I did not use the same sketch because look, my lemma only guarantees that once I will give you the coordinates, and that is with good probability. But now, once I have used that sketch to emulate an edge or to get an edge, now second time when I use this, it depends on what I have done previously. So the event starts to completely interact with each other, and we cannot have a guarantee that, oh, second time I also succeed with this good probability, because it depends on what you have emulated before. Okay, so you have to be careful when you use these sketches, because these are guarantees not of a deterministic data structure. These are the guarantees of a randomized data structure. So I cannot use M1 itself. Okay. So in the second round, what I will do, I will use my second sketches for the same vertex to get, okay, to get information about the contracted object, because I have not used it any time before. So this is why it was important for us to have log n iterations, because now I'm not going to use one matrix, but I'm going to use log n matrix, one for each round. Okay. So we are going to do pick independent sketching matrices M1 to MT, where T is like some order log n, and keep sketching MJAI for each node I and for each j between 1 to T, right? So what is the total space? Total space is like again n log Cn, since T is log n, right? So for each of them, you are going to keep not one sketch, but roughly log n sketch for each vertex, right? And how do you create this? Well, this is created using M1, this is created using M2, and this is created using MT. Okay. And each sketch has size polylog n. So total number of sketches we use is Tn some polylog n, right? And T is also on polylog n. So in total, we have order n log some Cn. Okay. Okay. And so, and whenever you want to use a graph in the next iteration, so in the jth iteration, you use the sketches coming from MJ. You don't use the sketches from before. Okay. Now, what does it allow us to do? Correctness just requires that each iteration has high probability, and then we have to use union bound over iteration. And since sketches are independent, and in each iteration use union bound over all vertices using high probability of N0 sampling. Okay. So across the round, you use independence of matrices. Okay. And inside the round, you use union bound for L0. Okay. So this is why we can say that at end of this whole operation, we are able to output if there is a spanning tree, right, in my graph with very high probability. So algorithm is very simple. Okay. We have, for each vertex, we have order log n sketches. Okay. Each round, each vertex uses different sketches, or let's put it this way. So the way to construct these objects is that you construct these randomized data structure proportional to number of queries you might ask. Okay. So the number of queries a vertex could be asked could be some log n times. And in fact, every vertex will be asked log n queries, like in each round, because we need to sum them up. Okay. And that is why the total number of queries is roughly n log n. So you keep n log n data structure, and each data structure takes polylog n space. So total space of this whole algorithm is n polylog n. Okay. So this is how we can do the whole connectivity sketch using L0 sampling and everything. So I think now it's a good time to take a break, and then let's come back and do how to do this L0 sampling. Okay. Okay. So if you have any questions until now, I think it's a good time to ask questions.
So is it is it published in some book, written in some book, or it's some research papers you discuss?
Yes, there are research papers on this. There are no books for sketching at this point of time, unfortunately. Okay, so there are some lecture notes here and there.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but those lecture notes are very sketchy. So I have tried my best to put more details into this, because most of the lecture notes are used with certain assumptions by people. So, but there are lecture notes for these things. So if you look at my website, I do point out to lecture notes for each of them.
Yeah.
But there are no books for it. Okay, so So as I told you, right? So some of my motivation in the beginning was some of the puzzles which I'm going to tell you now. So, and once we try to solve these puzzles, they become very good object, which are very extremely useful and powerful object in randomized algorithms. So L0 sampling, whatever that means. Okay, so I'm going to prove the lemma which I wrote in the beginning. So everything else I have proved, but what I have not proved is the lemma that how do you get this matrix M, and given that matrix, how do you guarantee that you can give me the coordinate I and xi with good probability, 1 minus 1 by poly. Okay, so we are moving towards proving that lemma, but that will wait, because otherwise it will look like completely magical, which I don't want it to look like. So I'm going to, okay, ask a different question. Is X sparse? Detect and recover. Okay, what I mean by this. So up until now we have looked at what is called, for a vector X in Rn, looked for a sparse vector Z in Rn. That is an approximation of X, right? And what we meant was that we looked into two norm, and with the property that Z0 was less than or equal to K. Okay, and we used count sketch to do it. But now our question is slightly different. We would like to design an algorithm that can detect if the input vector is 1 sparse or S sparse in general, and if so, find the corresponding indices. Okay, so is the question clear? So like at the end of my stream, I have this vector X, okay, and I want to know, is there more than one coordinate that is non-zero, or exactly one coordinate that is non-zero? And if this is the case, I want you to output the coordinate and the value. Okay, so is the question clear? So I want to do this question. Okay, now suppose we'll start with this notion of what is called one sparse detection and recovery, and so how we can use it to design an S sparse and recovery algorithm. I will not focus on this today that much, but let's focus on this. So now suppose this is a promise problem. I have promised you that X is given in Rn in streaming, with promise that there is a single non-zero xi, and I want you to find me that coordinate and the value. That's it. I promised you that my promise is that there's a single non-zero xi, okay, in the whole thing, but it's in the streaming. X is given. So like in between, I have no guarantee. Like there could be some positive coordinates, negative coordinates, there could be all, but at the end, I promised you that there's a single non-zero coordinate xi, and I would like to find the coordinate and the value. Okay, any suggestion for the solution? This is why I said it's a puzzle. Okay, so let's ask slightly different puzzle. Okay, I told you that the numbers are coming from the range 1 to n, okay? And I told you that, okay, every number comes exactly once, okay, except 1. Find the missing number. How will you find this? In a small space, right? So no deletion, nothing, okay? Nothing for now, like no deletion, nothing. Every number is going to come 1, 2, 3, n, except maybe some blank number is not coming, okay? You have to find me the blank number. How will you find this?
Compute the sum.
Exactly. Excellent. Okay, so that's the first idea. Okay, So we'll keep. So what Piotr suggests is that let's keep the sum. Okay. Okay. We have kept the sum, and at the end, what will, if I understand correctly, he knows the sum of j equal to 1 to n. Okay. This sum he knows. Let's call this w, and he has the sum s of the numbers which are coming. And so what he will output is w minus s. Okay. So this is one possible way of doing things, right? So why can't we do this? Or something of this nature. Can we do something of this nature? What happens if we just keep the sum? Can't we tell what value is non-zero? Like what is the value of that non-zero? Like can't we find xi just by this idea? Do you get my question? What happens if we just keep the sum? Like whenever the number, so I have a s, whenever an entry come I xi or whatever, I just go and add xi. Like for any I comma delta, I just add delta to delta I to that. Nothing. Can't I get xi then? Okay, so what I mean by this is the following. So suppose I had 0, 2, 0, 0, 0. But suppose my 1, 1, 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1, 1 plus 1, 2, 2, 3 minus 1, something like that. Okay, 3 plus 1, so on and so forth, right? So all I'm saying, let's just sum this second coordinate. This one. Like whenever changes come, I have s. I say, oh, delta I has come. Okay, let's make s plus delta I. This is all that I will do. What will be at the end stored in s? If I have promised to you that there is a single non-zero xi, if I sum these numbers, 1 minus 1, 0, minus 1 plus 1, 0, whatever it is, right? So what is left here? Look, every other coordinate is 0 anyway. So those guys are going to contribute 0. What will be left here is xi. Is this clear? Okay. So if all I wanted was a non-zero xi, then that's easy. What is not easy is how to find the coordinate. Can we find coordinate? Can we come up with some tricks to find coordinate? Can you store something other than that, other than just the sum, right? So what we try to do at this point of time, we took forward the idea of Piotr for just a sum, okay, and we kept one vector s, right, and whenever, so right, which was initialized to 0, the sum vector, and whenever we had a change came ai delta I, what we did is s plus delta I, okay, and I know that at the end s stores the value of non-zero entry. But this does not tell me which coordinate it is. Can I somehow get coordinates? What will be the natural strategy to get the coordinate? Can we store something else, say some w, and with the help of s and w, get the coordinate? Anybody?
You store S plus I delta I and then divide one over the other.
So you would like to store what? Come again? W as, let's say, you said
S
something.
plus delta I, whatever you remembered before, I will store that.
Okay, so this is, yes, we will store. Okay.
In addition, S plus I times delta I.
S plus I times delta I. Okay. So rather, let's say we store W, new value, and let's say I store W plus I times delta I. Okay. Suppose I had just one coordinate. What will be value of S? S is definitely xi. But what is W?
Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no. They're there.
Okay.
There's only one non-zero coordinate. Right? Rest of them, look, at the end, what will the W store? W is nothing but summation over, look, each changes gives you a xi, right? So it is just going to give me j going from 1 to n, j times xj. This is what it is, W is, right? The same way, S is j equal to n xj, right? Now, if I had only one non-zero coordinate, this is going to be equal to that I times xi, right? So if I take W by S, I will get the coordinate I, right? So this is all that we're going to do. So, okay, so this is all that I have written here. So I have two vectors, A and B. While stream is not empty, and suppose JAJ is a current item, to A, I'm going to add A plus JAJ, and to B, B plus AJ. And what I'm going to return? A by B. This gives me coordinate. And what is XAB is equal to B. Okay? So if I give you a promise that there's a single non-zero xi, then I can find this. Okay? So because what is A? I in n, I xi, and B, I in n, xi. So if there's a single non-zero xj, then B will be equal to xj because all other sum becomes equal to 0. And what is A? All other I times xi is 0 except this j times xj. So j is nothing but A comma B. So by storing this particular A and this particular B, I can recover the coordinate as well as the value, if I'm promised this happens. But this algorithm cannot detect if it is a single j. If it is promised, then this is fine. But like what I mean by cannot detect, maybe, I mean like, okay, whenever it returns, whenever this is correct, whenever your input is like one sparse, then it is definitely going to be correct. But maybe I have several things which is coined together, like put together. A and B is sum of several coordinates, and hence, I mean, even though these premises are satisfied, that doesn't mean that I just have a single j, right? So I would like to not only recover, I would also like to detect, oh, this is a case of single j. Okay? Okay. So now, given x in Rn in streaming, detect if there is a single non-zero I. If so, find it. Or detect that such index doesn't exist. So now we would like to say, look, no. There are more than one coordinate which is non-zero. Or if this has exactly one coordinate which is non-zero, then I will output you that non-zero coordinate. Okay? Okay. 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 So this is slightly non-trivial algorithm. Okay? So what we will do, we'll choose a prime between some n to the power c and 2n to the power c. And we will choose R uniformly at random from 1 to p. Okay? And now, apart from keeping that A and keeping that B, I will have another. See? So now what I'm going to do is, this is basically I'm doing fingerprinting. Okay, you will see what I mean by fingerprinting in a minute. Okay, so if you have seen randomized algorithm, you understand what fingerprinting means. Okay, so all I'm going to do is some sort of fingerprinting now. So whenever I have a J, so look, this is my same A, this is my same B, but now C is C times RJ to the times AJ. It should have been mod P here. Okay. Now what I do, I check if A divided BB is not, it is not giving me some number between 1 to n, then I know that this is not a good, like this doesn't even corresponds to something interesting. And I also check, is C not equal to B times R to the power AB, then we say fail. Else we return everything. Okay. Now we have to analyze why this algorithm is correct. Okay, so let's try to think. So what is A? As before, I in n I xi, which is same as I xi not equal to 0 I xi. And what is B? Same. It is basically sum of all this. Now what is C? I in n R I xi mod P, which is same as this. But now if there is a single index I so that xi is not equal to 0, then definitely B is equal to xi, A equal to xi. But what is C? Right? C will only correspond to this random number which I have chosen from 1 to P, the corresponding power, because after you are summing, you are basically, now you are still summing the same thing, but you are summing with some extra R to the power I. So you have chosen a random R and you have taken R to the power, the index or the coordinate time the value. This is all the time doing. So if everything else is 0, this is what it is. So this is nothing but R to the power A by B XAB mod P, and we find the correct answer. Okay. But the problem happens. So if you have a single one, then this is fine. But assume that X is not one sparse and A comma B is in N. Okay. So let's say that algorithm, one sparse detector, whatever, passes the test if A comma B is in 1 to N and C is this mod P. Okay. So I'm going to prove this lemma to you. Let A be all those index 1 to N, xi is not equal to 0, be the position of non-zero entries. Okay. If mod A is equal to N, then this will pass the test and this will happen. But if the number of non-zero entries is more than 1, then it does not pass the test with high probability. Okay. So let's see why this is correct. Okay. So first part is easy. So now let's suppose that okay, so let's say mod A1 is not equal to 1. Okay, then let's consider the following polynomial. Unfortunately, my pen is less charged. So let's go back to what. So if mod A is not equal to N, then look at the corresponding polynomial fz. So what is this? This is basically the C, right? And I'm subtracting BZAB mod P. So if there would have been a single entry, then this will be equal to 0, right? And what is the polynomial of this degree? Well, z to the power j mod P. J is the number of coordinate, right? So if j is a number of coordinate, then this is a non-zero polynomial of degree at most 1. Why do you have a false positive? Well, I have passed the test. It means this minus this is equal to 0, fr equal to 0. But when a polynomial in single variable of, this is a polynomial in single variable of degree at most n evaluates to 0. Well, at some random, how much degree it had. So it evaluates to 0 at its root, and the number of roots it has is upper bounded by n. So it evaluates to 0 at random r with probability number of roots divided by p minus 1, which is 1 to the power nc minus 1. So you will succeed with probability 1 over 1 to the power nc minus 1. And this is what is called fingerprinting. Right? So to prove this, what I have done, I have associated a polynomial and I say, look, the only region you will fail is that you made a wrong choice of r, right? So if you choose this r wrongly from here, if you make bad choice of r, okay, then this algorithm will fail. But I have told you among all this, how many bad choices of r you have? Well, at most n. And how do I prove this? Using associating a polynomial. Okay, so this implies that if I choose from a very large enough if I choose r from very large field or of large field or from large enough integer from 1 to poly n, the probability that I will hit on a wrong r is small. Okay, so this is what is used here. Okay, and for sparse detect and recovery, what we do is like we use one sparse detection and recovery as a black box to build a sparse recovery, and then we combine that with hash function to make sure that each coordinate lands in just one bucket and things like that. But I will not go into this. So I think I still have a lot of L0 sampling left. Okay, and so I think it's best that I do it next time, and then I give you some application of connectivity sketches in this. So what I'm left with is how to get this matrix, and to get this matrix we will use this idea but in a geometric way. Okay, what I mean by in geometric way, we'll say, look, it's like we will create enough filters. Okay, what I mean by create enough filters, that think of this, that I have a matrix where first row is all 1. Okay, second row, what I do, I toss a coin, and if it comes head I put 0, or if I toss a coin, if it comes tail I put 1. So how many expected number of ones will I see in the second row? N by 2. Third, I do with probability 1 by 4. Fourth, I will do with probability 1, so on and so forth. So this matrix which I created has log n, and each of this row is like a sieving. Okay, what I mean by sieving is that one of these guys, we will show that one of these vectors which we have created will sieve in the following way, is that if there exists exact like one coordinate, like even though you could have many coordinates which is non-zero, but there will be at least one of these vectors whose intersection with A, okay, is going to be exactly equal to 1. And so with the help of that vector, we will be able to sieve this. Okay, so this is the idea which we will try to apply. And this is why it is called geometric sampling, is because you are geometrically reducing the probability of each vector. Like you are making them. So basically what is happening is that if you could come up with a vector which could just hit one entry of your x, then that will be great. But creating that vector deterministically without looking at that x is very difficult. So we create this filter which has like many pores and several of them, such that we are able to prove that given any vector x, there will be one guy whose intersection with the non-zero coordinates will be 1. And once we have that, then all we need is this algorithm being applied at each of this level. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. So we will apply this algorithm with one more idea of sieving with respect to geometric sampling to come up with an algorithm to give a proof to our main L0 sampling algorithm. Okay, and I do not want to do it at this point of time because it requires bit of care and understanding, and that's a crux of many algorithms in streaming. So it is important to understand that well. So I think with that, I think I will stop today. Okay. Okay. Unless there are questions, please let me know.
No, thanks for a second.
Okay.